eutrophication is just one of like the signs that it can be caused because since that's the increase in algae, it's like one of the, if we need into it.
I think it's a more broad term, and so even heated water is eutrophication because it drives away oxygen, you know, and this is more specific kind due to algae, but it is a part of eutrophication. And I was thinking the same thing. Other questions? Thank you very much. Camlinh has a very different kind of presentation for you. You're all dressed up.
Yes, I'm very nervous. I had nightmares about this presentation last night.
You did? And since she has a Prezi, which means we'll copy this and go to the internet. Oh, there it is. No, go.
Out of curiosity, I'm wondering how many people believe that they don't use cosmetics. Can you please raise your hand?
Do not use cosmetics.
Yeah, raise your hand really high.
Do not use cosmetics. Raise your hand.
Raise your hand if you believe you do not.
Does that include deodorant?
Actually, you really do. If you use toothpaste this morning, that's considered cosmetic.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, you ready to go?
I hope it's working.
All right, this is, now you can go to full screen, right? This is called a Prezi, so it's a different way, like PowerPoint, of presenting. It's a large format, and you move around to the different sections. Okay? Okay, there you go. Camlinh, go.
And so my presentation is on cosmetics and the environment. And I am very interested in this issue, so if you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them at the end. My story starts with having sensitive skin. I was born in an unfortunate population of having many skin troubles, so a lot of skincare products do not really work with me, and I had to resort to researching on my own about which products actually work for my skin. And my mom is very into cosmetics. She's probably one of many Asian moms that I know out there who owns tons of luxury cosmetics. And she has cosmetics or makeup that's actually older than I am. And I was wondering if that's really safe for my skin. To connect this to the environment, there are actually a lot of chemicals and natural ingredients and raw ingredients that go into your cosmetics. So the FDA defines cosmetics as in anything, basically any substance that's intended to be poured, rubbed, cleansed, or have those very outrageous claims of anti-aging and stuff like that. We also have fingernail polishes. We also have other toothpastes, deodorant, things that you use on a daily basis like shampoos and conditioners. And recently, Johnson & Johnson, I believe is owned by Procter & Gamble, was criticized for having safer ingredients in their baby shampoos and conditioners in Japan than in the US. And there was an advocacy for having safer ingredients in American cosmetics as well. So the first mineral that I researched on was titanium dioxide. This is very common in makeup. And oxides are usually used to improve the coloring of your makeup or to add SPF or any sun kind of blocking type of qualities. And it's mine, obviously, based, I believe anatase and rutile are crystalline structures where the titanium dioxide would be extracted from the rock and then chemically processed to be used for ingredients in your cosmetics. And another common ingredient is colorant, so micas. Obviously the cat is not mica, it's probably the name of the cat, but you can see that. You can see micas come in very many colors, and the FDA approves this as a colorant. There are colorants that are safe for your eyes, there are colorants that are safe for your mouth or face, so please be careful when you use different lipsticks as your, I don't know, eyeshadow color, but be careful of that because some colors will not be very safe for your eyes. And and I was wondering if micas are actually mined in the US because I think mica is very exorbitant quality in terms of abundance in the earth. But we actually import mica, and it's not very large, but we're going to primarily import mica from Brazil, China, India, and Russia, and this is from the United States Geological Survey. Yep. So import sources, Canada 34%, China 34%, India 22%, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm going to go into more in depth about the ingredients that goes into these cosmetics. So we are kind of attracted to the idea of, oh, this product is really good for your skin. And some of these additives are actually to bulk up your cosmetics. Common is cornstarch powder or rice powder. They're actually pretty good for acting as a nice veil for your face, so a good slip to put other ingredients on to retain that on your face. And other common ingredients are naturally from pearl powder. China believes it makes your skin healthier, more radiant. And this goes into other ingredients like clays, calamite clays, and other sorts. A common cosmetic that I found was silicas. Girls use this a lot. It's that HD powder, whatever girls use to give your face that flawless finishing glow. And there's a difference between crystalline silicas and microsphere silicas. You should know that crystalline silicas are carcinogens, but they're not used in your cosmetics. The safer one that we all know that we use is microsphere silicas. And I actually found it cheaper to make your own cosmetics and buy it from wholesale cosmetic websites rather than buying it from companies like in Sephora or things like that. And this goes into the issue of informing yourself that you can read ingredients on your labels, or you're going to end up with products that won't really work for your skin, that irritate your skin. And I don't see the point in using these ingredients if I have no idea how to pronounce them in general. The recent controversy that comes up in cosmetics is actually parabens, which are preservatives. And if you don't know what parabens are, they've been a really hot topic issue, and the European Union, I think, they're trying to advocate to phase out these preservatives in their cosmetics right now. FDA believes, adversely from the advocacy group Cosmetics Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, that they believe that at the time there's no concern in the use of parabens. And I find that ridiculous because parabens can actually mimic estrogen levels and other endocrine systems. If you research more about the effects of parabens, there's actually discrepancy on parabens basically because of the dosage levels used in lab testing. But this particular article that I recently researched from 2011, the scientists tested that these parabens actually are linked to breast cancer. They actually, at significant dosage, can cause lower testosterone levels and sperm count levels. So guys, be careful. If you continually use parabens at this rate, mixing all these chemicals in your body, it can be very dangerous as we start to be introduced to more parabens. A common preservative that I didn't find on my ingredients label on food, I think it was like bars root beer, they started labeling sodium benzoate to my root beer, and I didn't like that. Again, the issue of if the FDA thinks cosmetic ingredients are safe, why does it matter? So this comes into ethical issues because we all use this in our bathrooms and they all get flushed down here. And they could end up in the oceans where it's not treated. Recently, well not recently, but in 2007, I think that's pretty recent, San Francisco Bay got a ton of these toxins and it caused hormone changing levels in the waters. So 80% of the streams were affected by this. So what can we do? we can innovate. Recently, I did a quick Google search, and Purdue apparently hosted a contest about cosmetics using cosmetics of corn-based ingredients rather than petrochemicals, which are probably based in a lot of cosmetics that we use today. And of course, it doesn't help for me to lecture you on this. Please research and find out for yourself what cosmetics are right for you. A lot of other issues that I haven't touched on is animal testing, the sustainability of keeping animals in cages for animal testing. FDA actually does not require animal testing for cosmetic ingredients, but cosmetic companies like P&G, I think companies like Almay or Revlon also continue to use animal testing. So I don't think Revlon, Almay, but a lot of other companies that are really multi-billion-dollar companies actually refuse to sign treaties for safe cosmetics, which I find very interesting. Biodegradable bottles, packaging. I know it's pretty packaging, you can't resist, but try to stop. Ingredients, mislabeling, sustainability of harvesting ingredients, and the controversy of organic types of cosmetics, so please. And the last thing you can do is vote with your money, spend it on companies who really, really want to make a difference and make it safe for you, your family, and your loved ones, and the environment. So thank you.
Camlinh, you did it on time. Come out here. Were you scared?
Yes, I hope I was making
It
sense.
did not show. Questions for Camlinh?
Do you deal with these issues by making your own cosmetics, or do you still buy them?
I still have cosmetics that have parabens and all these ingredients because I actually stockpiled when I was younger, but now I stopped. So as soon as I learned these issues, I found it better to not support these companies anymore.
Other questions? Up there, Leah?
Did you find any specific brands that were really sort of controversial in that way, that had a lot of these things added?
Can you rephrase your question?
Were there certain companies, like Avon, that tended to have a lot of abusive material in them, in their cosmetics?
I would say usually independent cosmetics in the United States I found much better, but in Avon Cosmetics, I think if they don't disclose their cosmetic ingredients, you should be wary of them. I know there are companies who fully take advantage of that, and they even list on their cosmetic bottles as fragrance. I don't know what fragrance is.
You can read the small print, right?
Yeah, if you bother to read the small print.
Okay, thank you, Camlinh. Okay, Jatnna? Your movie's working, so you're in good shape to go. All right. Let's push this button. All right, there you are. Look at that. Conflict minerals in phones. We're all there. Where's your cell phone? All right, here we go.
So I'm talking about,
Okay.
alright, I'm talking about conflict minerals in mobile phones. So for more than a century, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been plagued by civil strife and a deadly scramble for its vast natural resources. Greed for Congo's natural resources has been a principal driver of atrocities and conflict throughout Congo's history. So quick facts, more than 5 million people have died as a result of the violence. 1.3 million people have been displaced. Violence is disproportionately targeted at women and children. Mines controlled by armed rebels fund the war. Conflict minerals are just minerals that have been mined under warlike circumstances. So what's the role of the minerals? In Eastern Congo today, these conflict minerals are financing multiple armed groups, many of whom use mass rape as a deliberate strategy to intimidate and control local populations. Armed groups earn hundreds of millions of dollars per year by trading four main minerals, the ores that produce tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. This money enables the rebels to purchase large number of weapons and continue their campaign of brutal violence against civilians. So what do we have to do with this? The majority of these minerals eventually wind up in electronics such as cell phones, portable music players, and computers. Would you still buy your cell phone, TV, laptops, knowing that blood, war, and rape behind the parts that make up your technology, every vibration, every sound, every light on your phone comes from a mineral that was mined in places with soil rich in minerals? Many times, these are conflict minerals. So that's just a flow chart of where the resources come from and where they end up. So they're mined in Eastern Congo, they go to Rwanda, then end up in East Asia, then go to Europe, and then US. So our share of the conflict is that given the lack of a transparent mineral supply chain, American consumers have no way to ensure that their purchases are not financing armed goods that regularly commit atrocities, including mass rape. So conflict minerals have a trail of destruction as they make their way from the mines in Eastern Congo to the mobile phone in your pocket. For 5.9 million people, 87% of world population own a cell phone. Imagine what that number would be if we included all electronic devices that contain some of these minerals. So that's another flow chart. The map. So right here, that's Eastern Congo. It goes, this is a kid working on a mine. That's the mineral. It ends up in your phone. The mineral also gives money to fund weapons, and then you get blood in your phone, blood in your mobile. Okay, so what can we do? This is actually a study made by the Enough Project about companies and how they trace their minerals. So a very common one, which I was very interested about, was Apple, and they only trace 13% of their minerals, meaning that about 87% of their minerals are not traced, which means they might come from conflict areas in Congo. I personally have an iPhone, so this is an issue that's very dear to my heart. I do also own an HP, which I'm glad is on the top of the list, but it's only 32%. So about 68% still comes from conflict areas. So this is just how companies can make sure that their minerals are not from war-torn parts of Congo and other parts of Africa. This is another chart. It's very similar. The only ones that's changed are like down here.
How do Panasonic, can you go back? How does Panasonic, Canon, Sharp, and Nintendo, where are they getting their metals? Do you know?
No, they don't know. They don't trace them.
Okay.
So they have no idea.
Oh, I mean, that's no data.
Yeah.
That's not zero.
Yeah.
That's just unknown. Oh.
Yeah.
So the good ones are Toshiba, SanDisk, and IBM?
No,
Wow.
the good ones are up here. They're tracing their minerals.
Oh.
So like HP, it's 32% of their minerals are
backwards.
traced
Okay,
and are
thank
from
you.
good sources.
So at the top, green is good.
Yeah, green is
Okay.
good.
All right.
So at the bottom, these are bad. These are not disclosing the information, like where they get their minerals from. And then these only get like about 2% from non-Eastern Congo mines.
Hey, I'm John Prendergast of the Enough Project. I've been working on conflicts and in conflict zones in Africa for 25 years now. But I've never seen anything like the human devastation in Eastern Congo. The violence there is worse than anywhere else in the world. The deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, and the highest rates of sexual violence in the entire world. It is the most dangerous place to be a woman or a girl. A direct connection between our consumer appetites and the violence in Eastern Congo as a result of this, your cell phone. Basically, there are 4 minerals that come from the Congo that are in every one of our electronics products. Gold, and what we call the 3 T's, tantalum, tin, and tungsten. Tantalum stores electricity in your phone. If you didn't have tantalum in your phone, tungsten makes your cell phone vibrate. And tin is used as solder on circuit boards. Congo has a lot of tin. Gold is used to coat the wiring, and it's the highest valued metal inside every cell phone and laptop. That's why we call them conflict minerals. So here's how minerals in the Congo get from the mine to your mobile phone. But basically, the armed groups in eastern Congo act like a mafia. The mines themselves are controlled and taxed by these armed groups, by these militias. And then the smuggling routes, as they're smuggled across the borders to neighboring countries, particularly Uganda and Rwanda, those smuggling points are all controlled by these armed groups. All these places are making huge amounts of money by taxing and stealing the resources and smuggling them out of the country illegally. And the tool of choice, the human rights violation of choice of the militias and armed groups in the Congo is rape, in order to intimidate populations and punish populations for supporting other groups.
When the minerals are smuggled out of Africa, they head to Asia to smelting companies in Thailand, Malaysia, China, and India to be refined. Here, Congo's minerals get mixed together with other minerals from around the world, making them difficult but not impossible to trace. Finally, the 3 T's in gold are processed into components, and they end up all over the world in the products we know and love. Cell phones, Blackberries, laptops, iPods, video game systems, and digital cameras.
So that's all the bad news. The good news is, because we have a direct role in fueling the violence, as innocent and inadvertent as it might be, we actually have a role in bringing it to an end. The first thing we need to do is to create a demand, a consumer demand for conflict-free products. We need to get in touch with our cell phone manufacturers and our laptop companies and tell them we want conflict-free products. After 5.5 million deaths in eastern Congo, when is enough enough? We can all help end the war in the Congo. It's your call.
Okay, so as you said, what we can do is to pressure our Congress people to pressure these companies to only supply, to trace their supply chain and to only buy conflict-free minerals.
Jatnna, that was fantastic. Thank you. Really scared me. Be very quiet. Questions for Jatnna? There.
Do you know like any companies that are really good about not using?
Yeah, like the one at the top of the list, like HP is very good, but it's not enough. Like it's only 32%, which is traced to be non-conflict.
Other question? Yes, there's 2 back there.
Did you do any research on kind of like the reverse problem, where it's as opposed to like the production of these electronics, the disposal of them? Because I know that that's also a really big issue.
No, I was focusing more on like the conflict minerals. Yeah.
That's a problem too, though. Yes, Linnea?
So if we're pressuring them to monitor where they're coming from, so you're saying you don't want them to come from the Congo, right?
Yeah.
So where do you, like, do you think that would cause a problem for the country at all?
Well, as a problem, not really. Like right now, Congo doesn't receive any of the resources from these minerals. Like they have kids, people working in these mines, and they don't receive any of the profit. All the profit goes to the armed groups because they tax people about the minerals. So it's not really helping Congo right now. It's just funding a conflict. So if we stop that, then we stop funding the conflict.
It's called the resource curse worldwide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know if there's any push to like turn that into a legitimate business that could actually benefit the country?
Yeah, like the NOS project and Hope for Congo are both trying to work on the business aspect of the mineral.
Thank you very much. Linnea, come on down. Moving right along. When I saw Linnea's presentation, I actually stopped breathing. And we had an opening today, so I asked her to come and show it.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Ecuadorian Amazon. I was actually studying abroad in Ecuador last semester. BU has a really great program where you can go study in the university there. And I took this really interesting class called Amazon Societies. And we learned all about the people who live in the Amazon. In this whole region, the Amazon basin encompasses Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and tons of people live there. And so I went there, and I actually went to the place that I'm going to talk about today. And what was amazing to me is that it's so untouched, but yet, like for instance, I went to one town there, and there was no infrastructure. Like the state is largely absent in a lot of these areas, and so the petroleum companies have been able to like take a hold of a lot of things. Like I actually traveled around the whole Amazon area on this really, really great boat with this petroleum company throughout all these really impoverished regions. And so they've kind of got this really stark contrast between what's going on with the petroleum companies and the actual population. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Okay. So the Ecuadorian Amazon. I'm going to play a little bit of this video. Ecuador, their indigenous populations filed, it's the first lawsuit filed by someone from a different country in the United States. And it was a huge big deal in law and environmental stuff and all this stuff. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video for you.
A los ciudadanos de los Estados Unidos. Somos madres de familia. Somos padres que trabajamos muy duro todos los días. Somos abuelos que guardamos muchos recuerdos. Nos imaginamos que ustedes son iguales a nosotros, con corazones que palpitan, con ojos que aprecian la belleza del mundo que les rodea, con pies que caminan en el mismo planeta como nosotros. Queremos compartir una historia que ustedes deben saber. Sucedió en una región que se llama Amazonía Ecuatoriana hace casi 50 años. Teníamos agua limpia, alimento sano, plantas medicinales para curar las enfermedades, es decir, vivíamos en armonía con la naturaleza y la dignidad. Pero llegó en aquel momento una empresa petrolera, su nombre nos acordamos bien, Texaco. No conocíamos el petróleo, decían que el petróleo era algo bueno, que traerá progreso para el futuro. Nos acordamos de los derrames de petróleo casi a diario, el crudo bajaba en los ríos como sábanas negras. Nos acordamos de las aguas tóxicas que botaban en nuestros ríos. Nos acordamos del dolor que sentían nuestros hijos cuando se bañaban en los ríos con petróleo. Nos acordamos de las enfermedades, las deformaciones, el cáncer. Nos acordamos de nuestros muertos. Nosotros no les conocemos. Solo conocemos a la compañía Texaco, que ahora se llama Chevron. Nosotros somos gente con coraje y humildad, que estamos en una lucha desde hace muchos años para exigir justicia, es decir, que la compañía se responsabilice de todo este daño. En febrero pasado, Chevron fue declarada culpable por una corte de Ecuador por los daños que ellos hicieron en nuestra gente, en nuestro territorio. Pero la compañía ha dicho que nunca van a respetar la decisión de la corte, que nunca van a responsabilizarse de los daños y que seguirán peleando hasta cuando el infierno se congele. Queremos llegar a sus corazones para que conozcan la verdad. La compañía Chevron nos ha envenenado y también ha envenenado la imagen de Estados Unidos y de sus ciudadanos.
Okay, so I'm not going to finish that video, but he says it way better than I do. So basically what happened is Texaco came in, they exploited the oil, and they just kind of dumped waste.
It was Chevron Texaco, right?
Well, it was Texaco when they were in Ecuador, but then Chevron bought Texaco. So when the claim was finally brought to them, it was actually brought upon Chevron because they bought Texaco. But when it was there, it was Texaco. So basically, they didn't really take responsibility, you know, this whole idea of corporate social responsibility. And although they said I think it was $16 billion that they said they spent in cleanup, there's this really iconic moment where the lawyer from the trial goes to Amazon and says, okay, you spent $16 billion in cleanup. He puts on a glove, he sticks his hand in a pool of water, and it comes out and his hand is black. And he says, well, it doesn't look that the $16 billion really did anything. So Ecuador kind of has this whole history of resistance. You can look over this, like, talks about how Chevron was found guilty recently. Not going to talk about this. The indigenous movements, like, largely protested this. And so, in Block 31, which I talked about here, is block right next to this huge national park. And they actually were able to get Petrobras, which is the national company of Brazil, to leave because the resistance was so much by the indigenous communities. So then, kind of recently, they have this new socialist president, Rafael Correa, very controversial. I'm not sure if I support him or not, but he made a new constitution in 2008 and kind of tied in this whole idea of respecting nature into the constitution. It's specifically written there that people have the right to a clean environment. And so all this controversy is going on with Texaco, with just environmental degradation in general, and they discovered that in the Yasuni National Park, which is called a biosphere reserve by the UN, it turns out that they have 846 million barrels of oil. And they're like, well, we're really poor. We need that money. What are we going to do? So they kind of have this thing where Ecuador really needs money. I don't know if you've ever been to, like, impoverished Latin America. It really sucks. And so basically what Correa says is either the rich countries need to give us money or to not exploit this oil, or we have to exploit it. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about that, and it's called the Yasuni ITT Initiative. So they talk about revenues could be up to $7.61 billion just from exploiting this one area of oil, which for them is a huge amount of money. But then they say, you know, we have this history with oil. Here are the possible things that could happen if we do exploit this. They talk about environmental impact, pollution, deforestation, disruption of ecosystems, logging, everything like that. And then they talk about economic impact. They wouldn't be self-supporting. They have to rely on foreign companies to buy this oil. And a lot of that also talks about Ecuador is like very focused on, they don't like the idea of being a dependent economy. The social impact. A lot of these letters that they've written to the first world talk about the bad stuff that comes with the people from the city, because they're largely very rural, very close to nature. A lot of them are indigenous communities, so it brings violence, rape, money. You don't think these economies were subsistence economies most until the petroleum companies came in. They didn't, while they did have some trade, a lot of it, they didn't really have this concept of having extra cash, which brings a lot of problems. Political impact. There's a lot of conflicts, as you can see, with the resistance movement. And cultural impact. The people have changed a lot. I went and visited an indigenous community, and there was a teacher there who said 20 years before, when he first got there, they kind of lived interspersed into the forest. They're called the Warani people. I'll talk about them in a second. And then after he came and built a school, and the petroleum companies started coming in, and now they all kind of have their houses around this like town center, which is kind of cool, but at the same time, is that good or is that bad? So basically, Correa decides to have this thing called the Yasuni ITT Initiative. This kind of is the evolution of the idea. And so it's presented in January 2007, and it's to leave all of this in the ground, which is 20% of the country's oil reserves, for compensation of half of what they would gain, which comes to like $3.6 billion over 14 years. So they basically say, the first world, you guys are the people using this oil. You guys have responsibility. If you guys are the ones there, because the first world also protests them exploiting the oil, because Yasuni is supposed to be so great. And so he says, you have responsibility in this. If you guys can raise half of this revenue, sure, we'll leave it. Like, we don't really mind. We just need the money. We don't really want to exploit the environment. And so the objective of this was to solve in a creative way a threat in a highly vulnerable place with a positive effect on biodiversity, because the Yasuni is considered one of the most biodiverse places in the world. It would have less CO2 emissions because they could never use this oil, and respect of human rights because of the people living in this area. not going to show this video because I don't have time, but if you want to see videos of the Jatnna National Park, I have a video on here. So basically, Jatnna National Park, the biggest theory about why it's so mega diverse is because during the Ice Age, the Jatnna National Park, this area, didn't actually all freeze over. So it was a refuge for all the things that were being pushed out. So it was considered kind of like this refuge area. And so it's super biodiverse, 150 species of amphibians, 121 species of reptiles, 600 birds, 200 mammals, 644 different kinds of trees per hectare. And it's actually said that per hectare in the Jatnna, there's more different kinds of trees than in the US and Canada combined. So there's these unexploited oil reserves and there's illegal logging going on. So basically this is an awesome, beautiful, beautiful place. I've been there. It's very serene. There's indigenous communities. It's really interesting. So basically, if they exploit it, it's going to mean destruction of biodiversity. There's this indigenous community called the Guarani, and they've been contacted by the West now, so they are contacted, but they're still an indigenous community, and they still live off the land. And they were largely brought in when they were migratory tribes, not tribes, that's the wrong word to use, but they were migratory indigenous communities that when Texaco came, kind of brought them in, if that makes sense. But there were two groups, the Tagara and Taramanani, who said, no, Texaco, we don't want to be contacted by you, and they escaped into the Jatnna National Park. And there's actually this ethnic reserve there, which is where they kind of are allowed to be free. They've never been contacted by the West. I had a class with a guy who works with the people who study them, and the way they study them is just by following things they've left behind archaeologically. So we don't really have a way to tell them about the oil, and there's this huge thing that the water is now becoming contaminated around this region, and so they're afraid that these people are actually going to die off because of contaminated water because they won't know to boil it. But they're uncontacted communities living in this area, and so conservation of CO2. So the ITT is actually more sustainable than actually exploding the oil. And the trust fund is actually going to be run by the UNDP, which is the UN Developmental Program. The UN Development Program. So all of the money that they get is going to go back into like renewable energy and making them not a dependent economy, reforestation, R&D in science and technology. So it's going to go only into these really, really great things. It's not like they're going to get this money and go spend it on anything not important. So they want to get money from governments, international organizations, citizens, civil society organizations. Basically anybody can donate to this. And they're saying, we're making an example for the rest of the third world. They can keep their oil underground, and the first world can support this. So it's been supported by a bunch of governments. They raised half of the money they wanted to raise by 2011. So they're keeping the oil underground as long as we can come up with the money in the next like 2 years. And so basically that's a tree saying, go away oil, and yeah, okay.
There it flies. All right. Linnea, come out here. As the butterfly flies over our head. Questions for Linnea?
Do you think that they implemented last year for that, or they still?
Well, the thing is, so they have these things called YGCs, which are basically these like, basically it's a paper that you give to your donors that says, we're not going to exploit the oil, and if you exploit the oil, you have to give the money back, and then you stop, because they're going to be getting interest from this every year, and so it's really in their natural interest after this happens to keep doing it, because if not, they lose this fund, and so then they have to pay back all that money, if that makes sense. There's kind of like this financial thing in place to make sure that doesn't happen. If that makes sense.
Other question?
Did you take notice of where people get gasoline and like what companies were there?
It's actually mostly Petroecuador at this point because they nationalized everything. But like Petroecuador, when they're the ones who would be exploiting this, but they would be doing it in partnership with different with the national company of Chile or Petrobras of Brazil. And so yeah, right now it's mostly Petroecuador.
Thank you, Drew, Haley, Jatnna, Camlinh.